Welcome to Life Stories. Today, we bring you a tale of courage, determination, and the power of change. In this story, Samantha Davis, the newly appointed CEO of Apex Enterprises, goes undercover to uncover the truth behind a toxic work environment. What she discovers will not only change the lives of the employees but will reshape the entire company. Join us as we dive into a journey of leadership, empathy, and the lessons learned from standing up against discrimination. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's story. I still remember the way my heart raced as I stepped through the doors of Apex Enterprises for my first day. The sharp click of my heels echoed through the polished floors. But it couldn't drown out the pounding of my chest. There was an excitement there. Yes. But also an undercurrent of nervousness that I could not shake off. I had done plenty of preparations. But nothing could truly prepare me for this. It wasn't just a new job. This was a mission. A delicate dance between blending in and observing. All while staying true to my role as the newly appointed CEO. The plan was simple. Go undercover. Learn the truth about the company's culture. And make decisions based on what I observed. Apex Enterprises had been known for its impressive growth and cutting-edge strategies. But there were murmurs that something darker was lurking beneath the surface. My predecessor, a man who had been in charge for years, had left behind a trail of disgruntled employees and stories of favoritism and bias. It was time to dig deeper. I had chosen my outfit carefully that morning. A pair of dark slacks, a modest blouse, and minimal makeup. It was a deliberate choice. I didn't want to stand out. I wanted to be seen as just another employee. Not the person who would change everything. I wanted to experience the workplace from the inside out, without the influence of my title looming over me. But the moment I walked into the main office, I knew that things weren't going to be as easy as I had hoped. She was the first person I met. Karen Mitchell, the department manager, a woman whose gaze alone could have cut through glass. She looked me up and down with the kind of cold scrutiny that felt like a personal affront. Her eyes narrowed as if she could see right through me. As though she was already judging my worth before I had even spoken a word. She didn't smile. She didn't offer me a warm welcome or even a kind word. "Excuse me, miss, but you're in the wrong place," she said in a tone that was as sharp as a knife. Her voice dripped with condescension. And it hit me harder than I expected. I froze for a moment, taken aback by the sheer disdain in her voice. I wasn't sure if it was her tone or the way she looked at me that stung more. I took a deep breath and forced myself to remain calm. I had prepared for this. I had to stay composed. "I was told to report to this department," I replied, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. I could feel the weight of her gaze on me, almost as though she was examining my very soul. She scoffed, a sound full of derision. "And who exactly hired you?" she asked, her eyebrows arching in disbelief. I held back a smirk, knowing I had the upper hand, but I didn't reveal my true identity just yet. Instead, I pulled out a copy of my employment letter and handed it to her. She barely glanced at it before tossing it back at me, as though the paper were of no importance. "Figures," she muttered, her voice dripping with disdain. "HR keeps hiring just anyone these days." The way she dismissed me made my stomach churn. I had heard stories of workplace discrimination, of people being treated as inferior simply because of their race, gender, or background, but to experience it on my first day? It was beyond disappointing. Karen turned to one of the passing employees and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Bet she's some diversity hire. Guess they needed to fill their quota." I could feel my blood boiling. The sharp sting of her words ignited a fury deep within me. I had witnessed discrimination before, but never had it been so blatant, so carelessly thrown out into the open. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my composure. But beneath that mask of calm, a storm was brewing inside me. I had come here to observe, to see how the company truly operated. I had planned to stay undercover for a few weeks, gathering insight before making any decisions. But now, in the face of this blatant racism and bias, I wasn't sure if I could wait that long. I knew I had to be strategic. Reacting too soon could give me away. Could let Karen and the others know who I really was before I had the chance to expose the rot that ran through this department. So, I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. Is there anything else you need me to do? I asked, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. Yeah, Karen said, barely looking at me. You can start by organizing the supply closet. It's a mess. Her tone was dismissive, and the task she gave me felt like a deliberate insult. She didn't even bother to look me in the eye. The whole encounter left a bitter taste in my mouth. I forced myself to nod, even though every part of me wanted to confront her, to shout, to demand that she respect me. But I knew that would accomplish nothing. The battle wasn't with her, it was with the system. The culture of this company had been warped over the years. And I had to be patient. I had to gather evidence. Witness it firsthand. Then, I would act. As I made my way to the supply closet, my mind was spinning. I had seen this kind of thing before. The way people like Karen used their positions of power to belittle others. To create an environment of fear and disrespect. But I was determined not to let it break me. I was here for a reason. And I wasn't about to let one woman's cruelty set the tone for the rest of my day. In that moment, as I stood there in the closet, sorting through old files and dusty boxes, I realized something profound. It wasn't just Karen's actions that I was fighting against. It was the entire culture of complacency that allowed people like her to thrive. If I was going to make a difference, I would need more than just evidence of her actions. I would need to expose the deep-seated issues that were embedded within the very fabric of this company. The next day, I arrived at the office early. I wanted to see the department function before Karen even knew I was there. I slipped into the building quietly, trying to remain invisible. It was still early, and the office was slowly filling up with employees. Some were sipping coffee, others exchanging quiet greetings as they prepared for the day ahead. The buzz of morning chatter was soothing. But underneath it, I could sense the tension. I had to admit, I felt it too, a quiet, gnawing feeling that something wasn't right. By 8:55 a.m., Charles, one of the long-standing employees in the department, walked in. He was an older black man, his hair peppered with gray, his movements deliberate and steady. He had worked here for over 2 decades. Yet something about the way he entered the office made me pause. He was punctual, professional, and as far as I could tell, well liked by his peers. But the moment he stepped in, Karen's cold gaze snapped to him. "You're late," she barked, her tone hard and unforgiving. I blinked, watching as Charles's face tightened, his mouth drawn into a tight line. He didn't say anything, just nodded respectfully and went to his desk. It was 8:55. He wasn't late, but that didn't seem to matter to Karen. A few moments later, a younger white employee sauntered in, glancing at the clock as if it were a mere suggestion. It was 9:15, a full 20 minutes later than Charles. Yet Karen didn't say a word. She simply waved at him with a half-hearted smile. "Just try to be on time tomorrow," she said with a shrug, as if his tardiness was no big deal. My stomach twisted at the stark contrast between how Karen treated these two employees. There it was again, the favoritism, the bias, the complete lack of fairness. It was too blatant to ignore, too obvious to be just an accident. This wasn't the first time, and I was sure it wouldn't be the last. Later that morning, the department gathered for a meeting. I watched quietly from the back as Karen sat at the head of the table, her eyes scanning the room with an air of superiority. She was in her element here, unquestioned, unchallenged. The meeting began, and it didn't take long for things to get uncomfortable. Maria, the Latina receptionist who had been so kind to me when I arrived, was speaking. She had something important to share about an upcoming project. But before she could finish her thought, Karen cut her off abruptly. "Sweetheart," she said in a condescending tone, "let the men handle the important stuff." The room fell into an awkward silence. I could feel the weight of the moment, the unspoken words that hovered in the air. Maria's face flushed a deep shade of red, her hands fidgeting with the papers in front of her. She didn't look up. She didn't challenge Karen. She just sat there, waiting for the conversation to move on. her voice drowned out by Karen's authority. I clenched my fists. The injustice was overwhelming. Maria had been silenced. Her ideas dismissed simply because of her gender. And for what? To maintain Karen's sense of control? To keep her little kingdom intact? I could see the pattern now. It wasn't just about race or gender, it was about power. Karen had created an environment where she held the reins. Where only those who aligned with her, those who looked like her, acted like her, or were willing to play by her rules, had a voice. The rest? They were nothing more than pawns in her game. At that moment, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I had come here to observe, to gather evidence, but now, the urgency to act overwhelmed me. I couldn't let this go on. I couldn't sit back and watch people like Charles, Maria, and so many others suffer under Karen's toxic leadership any longer. It was time to reveal myself. It was time to confront this head-on. To make it clear that change was not only necessary, but imminent. As the meeting wrapped up, I excused myself and made my way to Karen's office. My heart was beating faster now, the adrenaline surging through my veins. I walked with purpose, each step echoing in the quiet hallways. When I reached her door, I knocked twice, not waiting for a response before I opened it. Karen looked up, her sharp eyes narrowing. "You need something?" she asked. Her tone already dismissive, as though she didn't have the time for someone like me. I walked in, closing the door behind me with a quiet click. The tension in the room was palpable, and I felt every inch of the space between us as if it were a battlefield. "Yes," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I'd like to discuss some concerns I have about this department." She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "You've been here a day and you think you know anything?" she said. The contempt in her voice thickening. I didn't flinch. I knew what I had to do. "Oh, I know plenty," I said, sitting down across from her. "I've seen how you treat people. And I've seen enough to make my decision." Her eyes narrowed, a sneer spreading across her face. "Decision? What decision?" I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "I'm Samantha Davis, the new CEO of Apex Enterprises." The color drained from Karen's face. She stammered, unable to form words. The shock was written all over her face. And for a brief moment, I felt a strange sense of power. But it wasn't power that I craved, it was justice. "I came undercover to observe the culture of this company," I continued, my voice steady, unyielding, "and I've seen exactly what I needed to see." Karen's eyes widened, and she stammered again, this time trying to backpedal. I didn't mean." "Oh, you meant every word," I interrupted, standing up. "And now, I mean every word when I say you're fired." Her mouth hung open, but no words came out. For a moment, she just stared at me. Disbelief and fury etched into every line of her face. The tension in the room was unbearable. I crossed my arms, watching her, knowing the decision had already been made. "Security will escort you out." Before she could respond, 2 security guards appeared at the door. Their presence as inevitable as the change that was coming. As they ushered her out, I opened the door to reveal the entire department. Standing in stunned silence, the employees watched, their eyes wide, uncertain of what had just transpired. But some of them, like Charles and Maria, seemed to stand a little taller. Hope flickering in their eyes. "Change has finally come," I said, my voice carrying across the room. Not just to them, but to the entire company. The air in the office was thick with silence. As Karen was escorted out by security, the employees remained still, as if frozen in time. I could feel their eyes on me. Some filled with disbelief, others with a sense of cautious hope. The room buzzed with quiet whispers, murmurs of confusion and curiosity. But there was something else underneath it all, relief. They had been waiting for change. For someone to stand up and break the oppressive silence that had held them captive for so long. I stepped into the center of the room. My heart steady but my mind racing. I knew this was only the beginning. Firing Karen was just the first step in what would be a much larger transformation. It was a symbolic act. Yes. But it also held a deeper meaning. The culture of fear, favoritism, and discrimination that had festered here for far too long needed to be eradicated. And I was the one who would do it. I cleared my throat, and the room fell silent once more. For too long, this department has operated under toxic leadership. I began, my voice calm but resolute. That ends today. I paused, letting my words settle over them. They were listening now, all eyes on me. I could feel their tension, their uncertainty, but I also felt something else, an unspoken yearning for change. A desire for something better. It was that yearning that would fuel me through the difficult days ahead. I came here undercover, I continued, because I wanted to see firsthand what was happening. Now that I have, I promise you this. Things will change. I scanned the room, meeting the eyes of every person there. Some looked hopeful, others nervous, but all of them were paying attention. My eyes landed on Charles, and I could see the years of frustration in his gaze. He had been here for over 20 years. And yet, his contributions had always been overlooked. His voice drowned out by those who played the game. Charles, I said, my voice softening slightly. You've been here how long? 23 years, ma'am, he answered, his voice steady but laced with weariness. I nodded slowly, my heart heavy for him. And yet you're treated like a rookie, while others who have barely been here 2 years get more respect. Why is that? Charles gave a small, tired smile, but there was no joy in it. That's just the way it is, he said, his words carrying the weight of decades spent in the shadow of inequality. No more, I said firmly, not anymore. You deserve more than this. And I'm going to make sure you get it. The room seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was hope in the air. I turned my gaze to Maria, who had been standing quietly in the corner, her eyes downcast. The memory of how Karen had humiliated her earlier that day still stung in my mind. Maria, I said, and she looked up, surprised that I was speaking to her directly. Every time you speak in a meeting, you're interrupted, ignored, or dismissed. Tell me, do you think your voice is valued here? Maria's eyes widened, and she looked down at the floor, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. No, ma'am, she muttered, barely audible. I nodded, a deep sadness washing over me. That changes today. You have a voice, and it will be heard. There was a quiet murmur in the room as I looked around at the others. The younger employees who had aligned with Karen's toxic leadership shifted uncomfortably, their guilt palpable in the air. One of them, a man named Greg, finally spoke up, his voice laced with defiance. So what now? He asked, crossing his arms. You going to fire all of us? I studied him for a moment, assessing whether he was truly willing to change or if he was simply trying to save face. That depends, I said. If you were complicit in Karen's behavior, you have two choices. You can either correct your actions and prove that you belong here, or you can leave. Greg swallowed hard, clearly unsure of what to do. He nodded, but his eyes were still wary. I'll prove it, he muttered. Good, I said. From this moment forward, this department is under new leadership. Promotions will be based on merit, not favoritism. Everyone will have a voice. And if I catch even a whiff of discrimination, you'll be following Karen out that door. There was a long pause, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Then, slowly, Charles began to clap. Maria joined in, and before long, the entire department was applauding, the sound echoing through the office like a wave breaking free. The tension in the room shifted, replaced by a sense of release, of freedom. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. This wasn't just about me, it was about all of them. It was about the years of silence, the years of feeling invisible, overlooked, and underestimated. Today, they were seen. Today, they were heard. The transformation was only beginning. Over the next week, I worked tirelessly to restructure the department, to create a new culture, one that valued every employee, regardless of their background, gender, or tenure. I promoted Charles to a senior leadership position, giving him the respect he had long deserved. Maria was given more responsibility, and her ideas were given the space they needed to flourish. A new hiring and training initiative was put in place to ensure that the toxic culture would never creep back into Apex Enterprises. It wasn't an easy process. Some of Karen's former allies quit, unwilling to adapt to the new system. But that was fine by me. Apex had no place for people like them. I had come here to root out a single toxic manager. But what I had found was a deep-seated culture of discrimination that had been ignored for far too long. By taking action, I hadn't just removed one bad manager. I had changed the entire trajectory of the company. And in that moment, as I looked around at the employees who had supported me and who now stood with me, I realized something profound. Real change doesn't come from the top down. It comes from the people. From the collective will to do better. To be better. And together, we were going to make Apex Enterprises a place worth working for. As the weeks passed, the changes at Apex Enterprises were undeniable. The once toxic environment had been transformed into a thriving, inclusive space where every employee felt valued. The cliques that had once divided the team began to dissolve, and respect became the new standard. I saw it in the way Charles held his head higher, the way Maria spoke up confidently in meetings, and the way the younger employees worked together. Not out of fear, but out of a genuine sense of teamwork. But the work didn't stop there. This was just the beginning. The culture of Apex had shifted. But it was a continuous process. I knew that as CEO, it was my job to ensure that this shift remained steadfast. That the lessons we had learned would not be forgotten. It was up to me to continue setting the tone, to lead by example, and to make sure that no one would ever be silenced again. I often think back to that first day when I walked into the office, uncertain of what I would find. The journey had been challenging, but it had also been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. Not just because I had exposed the toxic leadership, but because I had been able to help create something better. A workplace where people were treated with the respect they deserved. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that real change requires action. It's not enough to see the problems, we must confront them. No matter how difficult the process may be. And when we do, we can build something stronger. Something worth staying for. Thank you for following this journey. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more inspiring tales. Together, we can make a difference.